The Constitution of the United States of America. This document is the ultimate authority in the American government. The legislative, executive, and judicial branches of government must all follow what's written in the Constitution. At first glance, this may not seem so strange, but consider that the Constitution is over 200 years old and that it was written by people of an America with vastly different beliefs than those held by Americans today. The framers would have had to write the Constitution in such a way that it remained relevant despite nearly everything around it changing. And well, they did. To start, some parts of the Constitution directly allow for change or modification. A prominent example of this is, quote-unquote, by law. Scattered throughout both the main text and the amendments to the Constitution is this phrase. Essentially, it means that Congress can choose to change or determine whatever precedes this phrase. It's simple, but also very useful and versatile. For example, the framers could have said that congresspeople would be paid a certain amount. But then if the amount needed to be changed, well, then it wouldn't be changeable. The framers recognized that some small details in the grand functions of government are best left for the users of the Constitution to determine. However, there are some circumstances which the framers couldn't expect in the slightest. To account for these sorts of events, the framers would have had to basically either make the Constitution one big choose-your-own-adventure book, or add a tool for making significant changes to the Constitution while keeping most of it intact. Needless to say, they chose the latter option, which is now known as the amending process. Technically, the amending process could make the president royalty or outlaw seedless watermelons, but it's such a difficult process that it's unlikely that either of the two scenarios would ever happen. In order to make an amendment to the Constitution, an amendment must be proposed by either 2/3 of both houses or in a convention held upon the agreement of the legislatures of 2/3 of all states. Once an amendment has been successfully proposed, it must be ratified by the legislatures of 3/4 of all states or by conventions in 3/4 of all states. If the amendment is able to make it through all of that, then it will be ratified and come into effect. But the quote-unquote by law and amendment way of changing things seem to be on two extreme ends. One is severely limited and makes small changes, while the other is extremely difficult to make happen and makes monumental changes. Fortunately, there is another way through which the Constitution can be quote-unquote changed, and this is judicial review. Established in Marbury v. Madison, 1803, judicial review is the power of the Supreme Court to interpret the Constitution. For an idea of the power and importance of judicial review, let's look at the freedom of speech. Guaranteeing everyone the freedom of speech under state law would have required a new amendment if the court hadn't decided that free speech applied to the states based on its interpretation of the First and 14th Amendments. This practice only really has one limitation: getting to the interpretation step. Supreme Court justices can't just decide on their day off that the Constitution does a certain thing. No, they must decide this after having a case brought to them and hearing arguments. Once this is complete, the justices can decide how they want to interpret the relevant constitutional text, and that's about it. The Constitution is a very old document, yet a very relevant one. In 1803, people relied on it as much as they do in 2023. It signified the rebirth of a nation when it was made, and today it stands as a symbol for the endurance of this nation. Thank you and goodbye.